In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 sources of income I currently have, because I see a lot of personal finance YouTubers put these sorts of videos out, and I really want to see a Kiwi version. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist and property investor here at Opus Partners. But before you think that I've got my money life all figured out and I know everything, let me just stop you right there. Over the last 6 to 8 years, I've gone from being in pretty scary debt, standing in the shower thinking, how did I let my life come to this, to investing in property and helping people like you on your money journeys and sharing them as part of the Property Academy podcast. And the thing is, here in New Zealand, most people don't like to talk about money, but I think it's really important. So while I'm not a financial guru, I'm someone who's still on my money journey like you, and I really want to share it. So I'm going to share some of my bank accounts, some screenshots about it, and how I started going about getting some of these income streams. And as you follow along, you might find a few sources of income you didn't even think about. Like almost every hardworking Kiwi, my first source of income came from my salary. And if you're just starting out in your first full-time job, you need to know that your income can go up pretty quickly in your 20s. When I started working my first full-time job, I got paid $42,000 a year. The next year, I negotiated that up to 44 grand, which was not a big increase, but it felt big at the time, and you take the ones you can get. I then changed jobs and industries. I got my base salary up to 45 grand, and the year after that was a great year. I negotiated quite a big pay increase. I got up to 70 grand, and a year later to $80,000. I then switched jobs and industries again, and I got up to 100K. Now, over time, I've worked my way up to comfortably being in the top kind of 5% of salary earners in New Zealand. And if you're thinking, well, how do you negotiate salary increases like this? You should definitely check out this video. I just released it 2 days ago, and it gives you the exact scripts of what to say and the emails to send. And again, this is not to say that I'm awesome, I'm the greatest. It's just to show you that earning more money and progressing in New Zealand is possible. And I think the mindset that you've got to have, and the mindset that's helped me, is not how do I convince my boss to pay me more? It's how do I first make myself more valuable to the business? Because the more valuable you are to the company you work for, the more they can justify paying you. And the way I like to think of it is, how do I either help this company make more money or make the same amount of money more easily? Because if I'm more valuable, if I'm giving more value, I'm going to get more value back in terms of a higher salary. One other big thing that is kind of obvious, but I don't think most people think about it, is your choice of industry. So whether you're working for a property business or an IT business or a retail business or something else. So one of my favorite business writers is Michael Porter, really smart economist, professor at Harvard. And one of the things he talks about is how much money a business makes is hugely impacted by the industry it is in. So for example, in my first job, I worked for a charity. It was an orchestra. And there was less money going around because charities don't make as much money. And that means that I couldn't be paid as much. Now, when I sidestepped into IT and then into property, I didn't just get an income boost from having more experience, though that's part of it. I also got an income boost because I moved into a more profitable industry that paid more. Now, I've got to be really clear again. I'm not saying don't go and work for a charity, because those roles can be really fulfilling. They make you feel good. But just keep in mind that it will also have an impact on how much you get paid. The second one, which really surprised me actually, is KiwiSaver. So this is my actual KiwiSaver. There's about $73,000 in there. And over the last 12 months, I made just over 10 grand from those investments going up in value. And I invested about 11 grand myself. Now, many New Zealanders have KiwiSaver, and you might even see that number creeping up every time you log into your bank account. But when you click in there and see, well, how much did I actually make from that investment gain over the last 12 months, it might actually surprise you. And to be honest, I don't look at my KiwiSaver very often, so I was quite surprised when I was preparing for this video and seeing, hey, a 10 grand increase is actually quite a lot of money. Now, this definitely goes up and down. The last year has been really good for the price of shares, and a lot of investors have done very, very well. So again, I'm not some genius, but check out your KiwiSaver because you might be pleasantly surprised. Now, some people in the YouTube comment section, you might legitimately say, well, KiwiSaver gains aren't really income because you can't spend that cash. That's just shares or a managed fund appreciating in value. And that is true. But us economists, we often talk about what we call economic income, which is how much wealth did you build in a year, whether it's cash hitting your account or your wealth going up because your shares or managed funds have gone up in value. So in this video, we're going to take that broader definition of wealth building because that's what this channel is all about. The third income stream that came into my life was property. And I should say that here at Opus Partners, this channel that you're watching this video on, we help people invest in property. And that does mean that I've got a bias to tell you that property is the best thing since sliced bread. Everyone should go out and buy property, and better yet, use your old mates at Opus to find your next property. Look, I'm not going to do that because I don't like being pushy. But what I will say is that I've probably made my easiest money through property. Depending where and when you buy, you might buy a house, you wait a few years and it goes up by $50,000 and you think, holy heck, that was very easy. Now, of course, it doesn't always work like that. I bought one of my early investment properties in 2019. I got the timing right and was very lucky over the next 1 to 2 years. But over the last 4 years, since late 2021, property prices have been going down. And right now they're moving sideways. So it's not a one-way bet, it's not always easy money, and it's not guaranteed money either. But the thing I love about property is that you get two types of income. First of all, you've got your rental income, and then you've got that economic income I talked about, which is the house going up in value, what's often called that capital growth. And if I add up all of the rental income from my 4 rental properties, it's about 130 grand a year. Now, that does not mean that I get $130,000 every year in my account to spend. I wish that was the case, but it's not, because there are lots of costs from your mortgage to rates, insurance, maintenance, property managers. And at today's interest rates, I think about 3 out of 4 of them actually need a top up. So the rent doesn't cover all of the costs, so I've got to top up that mortgage. So while the reality isn't $130,000 hitting my bank account each year, which I could then spend, which would be great, I do think that 130K of revenue is a decent side business that just happens without me having to think about it while I go off to work. And at the start, when you first buy a property, they often don't make you lots and lots of money. But then 2 things happen over time. Firstly, the rent goes up, and then the property value tends to increase as well. But your mortgage stays the same or goes down if you're paying it off. So that rising rent, that makes your cash flow better, and the rising property value, that builds your wealth. The next income stream that came into my life was starting the Property Academy podcast. I also wrote a book along with my colleague Andrew. It's called Wealth Plan, and we created this YouTube channel. And people sometimes see creating content, whether it's on YouTube, podcast, blog, something like that, they see that as a passive income. And for me, that hasn't really been the reality, and I want to talk about it. So I was actually pleasantly surprised when we were preparing for this video. I logged into YouTube and I can see we made about 6.5 grand over the last year through YouTube AdSense. That's the ads at the start and at the end of this video. And actually, I've got to admit, that was more than I thought it was going to be. We also wrote a book that sold almost 5,000 copies, which is pretty decent in New Zealand. I think all up we made somewhere between 80 to 150 grand. Now that's in terms of revenue. I'll talk about the costs in a second. And when it comes to the podcast, we deliberately don't have ads on there, even though I often get approached with people wanting to sponsor it. And I'll be really honest with you about the reason behind that. It's because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and every time an ad comes on, I'll be at the gym or something, I just skip ahead because I don't want that when I'm listening to podcasts. So I don't want to do that to other people as well. I see our podcast as just more giving back to the community as opposed to making as much money as possible. And so the reality of all of that is if we compare the revenue to what it costs to produce the podcast, get the book printed, have someone editing these videos, the income I get out of it is very marginal or actually non-existent. And I think that if you're a Kiwi, unless you're doing something really broad like a comedy YouTube, or you're internationally successful like my friend Sim from Girls That Invest, who is, by the way, she's absolutely smashing it. You should give her a follow. Well, unless you're doing something like that, you're probably not going to make as much money as some of the creators you might be following who come from the US or the UK, because New Zealand is just such a small market. And if you'd like to see more of these videos, then help a Kiwi creator out. Make sure you hit the like button. That's how I know if you want to see even more of these types of videos. Hitting the subscribe button, that really helps too. We are on our way to hitting our goal of 50,000 subscribers. And that leads me on to the final income I get, and was the last one I started getting, which is business income. So many people want to start a business. I remember when I was 12 or 13, I also wanted to start my own company, probably because I was watching a lot of Dragon's Den at the time. And I remember saying to my brother William that when I grow up, I want to be an entrepreneur. And he says, well, what's your business going to be? And I said, I don't know yet, I'm 12. But as I got older, I realized that starting a business comes with quite a few risks. In fact, recent data shows that businesses are shutting down at their highest level in like the last 10 years. So one day, many years ago, I was running on the treadmill at the gym, and this was back when I was a bit lighter than I am today. And I was listening to this podcast, and I wish I could tell you that I remember what the podcast was, but basically here's what the person said. Instead of starting your own business, try to get shares in a business that is already going somewhere and has some momentum. And I thought, okay, that sounds like quite a good idea. So that's what I tried to do. So after leaving my first job, which was the charity, the orchestra I told you about, I worked at a friend's company and I tried to get shares in that business. And we had some agreement that, yep, that'll happen, but it didn't quite work out. And look, sometimes that is life. Later on, after a couple of years working quite hard at Opus Partners, I managed to buy some shares in this business. And just being really honest with you, Opus has about 5 income streams. We help people buy investment properties. We have property managers and manage those properties for investors. We help people get mortgages and insurance and then also do property accounting. And some of you watching might decide to use some of those services. Some of you might already use Opus, and if you do, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And that all brings in 2 sources of income. First of all, we've got earnings from the business, and then the value of that business grows over time as well. And I wanted to walk you through these 5 sources of income, because if I was to go back to when I was starting in the workforce, 21, 22, if I was starting again, I'd probably do it in the same order. I'd use my salary to get into KiwiSaver. I'd use my KiwiSaver to get a start in property. I'd use that first property to buy more property, and then I'd use some of that to get into business as well. And the way that you grow your wealth and income, you can do that in multiple ways. This is a property YouTube channel, but it's not always about property. That's not the only way you're going to grow your income and grow your wealth. And remember, I'm not saying be like me, I'm great, do everything that I've ever done. I'm just one person who's still on my journey just like you. But money is often a hush-hush topic here in New Zealand, which is the exact reason why I encourage people to come on and talk about their money life and their property life on Case Study Sunday, which is a segment we do every single week on the podcast. And I think it'd be hypocritical if I say, please come on, share your money life, and I don't do the same. So hopefully this encourages you and helps you think about your own money life.